Giannis wins the game at the buzzer.
The Bettor podcast.
What up, everyone? Welcome in to the Bettor podcast. Finally got this show up and running. Appreciate every one of you that's in here already and everyone that'll watch it back as well. This episode 1, going solo, just to try and introduce the show so everyone knows what it's about. We'll be having guests in, though, from here on out afterwards so that you don't just have to listen to me basically rant on for the next half hour or so. But look, I mean, like I said, welcome in. It's an NBA betting show, but it's a little bit different. I didn't want to just do the generic pick show where I give out basically what I'm betting for the day. A little bit more evergreen content. So something that focuses on understanding the value, I think, of the current landscape for everyone, you know, addressing the hot teams, cold teams, who we buy, who we fade, what's sustainable in the league, what isn't, and what the future holds, I think, for a lot of these teams, both short-term and long-term, to help us sort of keep ahead as well as best we can ahead of the market and make sure that we have a nice little portfolio as well going forward as we get to sort of the second half of the season now. But yeah, like I said, going forward, we will have guests here, so I won't have to do this all on my own. But the segments will remain the same so that you guys can get familiar with them. We'll have our homework review, which is essentially what I've learned the last couple of days in between shows, teams, players specifically. We'll also have a look at a scouting report where we can deep dive into a chosen team or player and what to expect from them going forward, how to treat them in the marketplace, whether it's prop related or whether it's team related for futures bets. We'll also still have our bets we've made segment, which is a breakdown of my best bets for today. I'll pull up, my bet stamp account there so you guys can look at what I'm on if you aren't already following there. And then we'll wrap up with our squad ride segment, which is basically the Discord's best bets for the day. I'll talk through what I think and my numbers in those ones. And I'll discuss it with future guests as well to see what they think is the best squad ride bet. And we'll definitely keep track of those throughout the remainder of the season as well to see how the Discord performs there. But let's just jump straight into it. Like I said, this is episode 1, so let's get straight into our homework review segment. And I'm going to take a look specifically here at the Brooklyn Nets because I think that's probably the one team I've probably focused on these last few days in particular. Now that they don't have Kevin Durant available, and obviously he will be out for a couple of weeks still, maybe even a little bit longer than that. So things are certainly going to, I think, trend in the wrong direction for Brooklyn personally. We're only 2 games into the tenure, so I know it's a small sample size. Things can obviously change dramatically between now and when he does return in terms of their production and their style of play. But, this team has shown how stagnant I think the offense can get these last couple of games, especially in the fourth quarter. They don't have that sort of shot maker to rely on outside of Kyrie Irving. And it becomes very easy for defenses in the NBA to be able to just own in on one individual player if he's the only one that's sort of capable of creating his own shot. And I mean, we look at some of the metrics for the Nets. Let's start with having a look at what Kevin Durant brings to the table. So, I mean, plus 12.2 points per 100 possessions better when he's on the floor. That ranks in the 98th percentile in the league for individual impact at that end of the floor. They're 5.1% better with effective field goal shooting when he's on the floor. So we're talking a huge, huge chunk of their offense. And when you look specifically, I think, at what their offense does, they're first in the NBA in terms of shot making. And I think that is something that's going to speak volumes as to how unsustainable their current offense is without him. If you're ranking in the top sort of 2 or 3 in shot making in the league, it means you have elite shot creators that can create for themselves, that can make tough shots that aren't necessarily high quality looks. And obviously Kevin Durant probably does that as well as anyone in the league. And if you remove that, I sort of spoke about this on the BetUS show earlier today as well, where you take that away and it makes life really difficult for those role players, specifically on the perimeter, to still be able to contribute in the same way as what they were doing when he's on the floor. The space isn't the same. The looks aren't going to be the same. The wide open shots are not going to be the same. That's for certain. So there's a lot of pressure now, obviously, on the shoulders of Kyrie Irving in particular, to be able to not just create for himself, but to manage the offense. And that, I think, is where it might come undone for them a little bit. I don't know if he has that level of management in him on the floor. I obviously have questions about his leadership as well on the floor. As a Boston fan, I can tell you he's not that guy. He's not the guy that can lead you out there, especially through adversity or if things get tough. That's where it gets really tricky for them. So coming off of 2 home losses, heading out for a 5-game road trip, Kyrie being the guy that you're going to lean on, I don't know if that's necessarily what you want You need him to obviously be in complete alignment with Jacques Vaughn. We know that KD is. Whether Kyrie Irving is, I don't know, because he's going to have to now perform at both ends of the floor. And obviously what Durant was doing defensively as well is what, for me, had him very much in the MVP conversation before he went down. So looking at the last two games specifically for the Nets, 105.4 points per 100 possession against Boston, 103 points per 100 possession per 100 possessions, against OKC. Both of those really poor. We're talking 22nd percentile, 16th percentile in the league, those sort of splits and numbers. Both games sub 50% effective field goal percentage. That's really bad as well. And, again, the concern for me is, are these half court possessions going to just end in one and done situations? Brooklyn has not been a good offensive rebounding team. If they're not creating those extra opportunities, they're not a team that forces a lot of turnovers defensively either. They're sort of bottom half in the league in that regard. So if they're going to find themselves in situations where they're going to continue to play half court basketball, I think it's going to come a time where they just get really, really bogged down. And even today against the Spurs team that we know isn't particularly great defensively, San Antonio can do enough to secure rebounds. They're very good at that end of the floor in terms of limiting those second chance opportunities and creating second chance opportunities for themselves. So any team that has more possessions than them, I think, is already at an immediate advantage to Brooklyn. So I do have concerns for them going forward. That's sort of the one team I think we really can get ahead of the marketplace in this next week, where the adjustment probably isn't enough. Looking at the line today, this opened at San Antonio +6. I don't think they valued Kevin Durant properly into that line. You look at the Bucks line yesterday against the Pacers as a perfect example, where that opened at 11, that closed at 5. We're talking 5.5 points roughly of line value for someone like Giannis. I think Durant has to be in that ballpark, and I understand why it might not be the case, but I think if you really dive into sort of the impact he has on the floor for them at both ends of the floor, we're talking a plus 11 point differential per 100 possessions when he's on the floor for Brooklyn. It needs to be in and around that number. There is no way that the Nets would have been laying 11.5 points on the road at San Antonio if Durant was in. That's just far, far too many points. So I think that there's a good opportunity these next couple of weeks for us to get ahead of the market here in terms of fading Brooklyn and taking a lot of unders, I think, in their games, because I do think that they still are able to perform at a respectable enough level defensively. That's going to obviously be the impetus as well. If you listen to some of Jacques Vaughn's post-game interviews, he's sort of spoken about the need to really ensure that they're doing their part defensively, limiting those extra possessions, crashing the boards. The hustle effort, as he liked to describe it, needs to be A+ every single night. But offensively, it doesn't matter. I don't think how effectively they perform. They're still going to be heavily flawed, and teams are going to be able to slow them down pretty dramatically. So unders and fading Brooklyn these next couple of weeks, probably the two biggest takeaways I've got for my homework review on the Brooklyn Nets going forward. So hopefully that can transpire starting today as well, where we can keep fading them and being profitable in that regard. Let's now move forward, though, to the next part, which is the scouting report. And I want to dive into the LA Clippers here. Who are they? What are they? I think this is a team that I've got a fair few futures positions on already. I've remained adamant as well that as long as they're healthy, when it matters, they're going to be competitive and probably the worst matchup for most teams in the Western Conference. I haven't completely jumped ship, but I can understand the cause for concern and why. I mean, the offense hasn't really clicked yet, even when they are fully healthy and everyone's available. But, we need to see more reps there, and we need to understand that the sample size for those guys when they do have their starting five is sustainable for enough possessions and minutes that it's actually meaningful and worthwhile heading into the playoffs. So when we look at their starting five at the moment, when they are all available, Reggie Jackson, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Morris, and Ivica Zubac, they're still a +5 net rating differential. So they can still get it done. They have been getting it done. The concern, like I said, is still the offense, where that lineup is only 113.7 points per 100 possession. That's not good. That's below league average. That needs to be much better. But their effective field goal percentage with that lineup is quite high. We're talking almost 60%, which is near the 80th percentile. So that's really, really good. They're creating the shots that they want. They just haven't necessarily been knocking them down with consistency. And I think that obviously comes in part when the two main guys are constantly in and out of the lineups. They themselves can't find the rhythm that they want. We have seen Kawhi, I think, return to as close to the best version of himself as we might see, where his on-court presence, his shot creating, his playmaking has been basically as good as we can hope for. He's not as explosive as he was, but I think that that's got to be accepted, that he probably won't get back to that level. Defensively, though, this starting five is pretty fantastic. We're talking 109 points per 100 possession, 52% effective field goal percentage being allowed. They are in the 93rd percentile in offensive rebounds allowed, a 90th percentile in free throw rate allowed. So they do a really fantastic job in the half court there, making sure to minimize extra possessions, to get the stops when they need to get the stops, to limit opponent field goal percentage, and the shot quality that they're being allowed to opponents as well has been A+. So I certainly think that there is still a very realistic pathway where this team does figure it out before the playoffs come around and then become a really tough out for teams. But I can understand the cause for concern there for sure. Like I said, I still think that they need to get more reps and minutes in together in order to properly highlight, I think, what this team is capable of. But looking at their two stars, like I said, when they're available and healthy, they're playing at a very, very elite level. Paul George in particular, plus 8 points per 100% possessions better when he's on the floor is incredibly high. They are plus 6.7% better with their effective field goal output when he's on the floor. That is the 100th percentile. That is literally the biggest impact for an offensive player in the league for anyone. So that really highlights, I think, his value and why I think the Clippers, especially in the last couple of weeks, have really bottomed out when he hasn't been on the floor, because he just brings so much. He's a three-level scorer. He can get to the rim. He can operate in the mid-range. He's a terrific three-point shooter himself. And obviously having Kawhi and Paul George there together, much like Kyrie and KD in Brooklyn, when you have two guys who are very comfortable operating in the mid-range, very comfortable getting to their spots and attracting the attention of the defense, it only helps those role players, especially out on the perimeter, to be able to get the looks they want, to be able to execute at a high level, because they are getting wide open shots in the spots that they want to be set up in. So those two guys are absolutely critical, I think, obviously, to this offense coming together, but we just need them to start getting reps, I think, going forward, to properly get an understanding of where the Clippers stand in the landscape of the Western Conference. Because when I go through each team individually, even the top teams at the moment in the West, like Memphis and Denver specifically, I still think the Clippers in a best-of-7 series, assuming they are fully healthy, are the worst matchup for both of those teams because of the length and the wings and the versatility that they bring on defense in the half court. And like I said, we've already seen them in half-court defense execute with their starting lineup and with their sort of more preferred rotations, where they are able to remain a top-tier team, I think, in that regard. And looking at that starting five lineup, like I said, so far this season in the half court, we're talking 95th percentile in points per possession allowed, at just under 1 point per possession, which is elite. Doing a fantastic job of limiting second chance opportunities, which is obviously critical as well, and maximizing their offensive opportunities in the half court. So when it comes to playoff basketball, I really do still think that this is the team that's going to cause a lot of issues and concerns for teams. Look, I wouldn't expect Zubac to play large minutes if they were to play Denver in a best-of-7. I think they get creative in how they execute their rotations there. I think that they probably play a lot of small ball lineups, which isn't really small ball. I remember seeing Batum sort of touch on this, and he said, we play a small ball lineup, which isn't small ball because all five guys are 6'9" or taller. We're talking 7-foot wingspans on all of these guys. I think that's what they do with Jokic, where they probably just give him a multitude of different looks and try and make life uncomfortable for him there, get guys that can defend him a little bit more in his face. They might not necessarily have the reach to contest a lot of those shots in and around the rim, but it's more about preventing the ball from being able to get to him in those spots deep inside the paint. So yeah, I still think, and Memphis specifically, Memphis are a team that lacks that sort of wing presence in my mind. So they're a team that would struggle drastically, I think, in half court sets against a team like the Clippers. So I'm not out on LA whatsoever. I still think that this is a team that can bring it all together. The hardest part is just understanding what their identity truly is, because we haven't seen enough of them at full strength as yet. So hopefully, if Paul George is back tonight, or at least back this week sometime, we can get some consistent reps with him and Kawhi both on the floor together heading into the All-Star break. I think you'll see a really good opportunity as well to start buying on this team in the short term. Ty Lue's already spoken about tightening up his rotations. He wants to start running guys out there that are going to get minutes together in the playoffs. So I think that's really meaningful and important as well. So they're a buy team for me in these next couple of weeks heading into the playoffs, starting potentially tonight as well. Like I said, if we do get Paul George back in that lineup, it'll be interesting to see how he performs coming back off of such a lengthy time away, but just his impact immediately on the floor for the Clippers offense should work in a pretty big way. So I do have value as well towards the over in that game, largely on the back of whether Paul George plays or not, and the Clippers being able to generate and hit the shots that they should be hitting as a result. So that's where I stand on the Clippers at the moment. They're a team I definitely want to revisit with a couple of guys and a couple of guests going forward who are both really high on them and really low on them as well, so that we can get a really good understanding of exactly who they are, what we can expect from them going forward. But I'm not afraid of my market position on them. Obviously, it's not a great number at the moment. I don't want to necessarily add any more either just yet. So we'll sit and wait to see what to do with them there. But that is a little deep dive on the LA Clippers. And like I said, I look forward to probably discussing that team specifically in a little bit more detail going forward, where we can get both sides of the stories there. And hopefully, like I said, we get some more data and possessions for a lot of these starting lineups and rotations that we can dive into and sort of come to some more concrete conclusions on exactly where they stand and what they're going to be in the near future. So for today, though, let's dive into the bets I've made. Just a one play for me on the board today. The San Antonio Spurs, we grabbed them at a +6. They've dropped, obviously. I mean, they dropped a little bit prior. They now dropped even further on the back of the news that Kyrie Irving is questionable. Look, if he's out, we're obviously going to get a ridiculously good market position again, which hasn't been the best recipe, I don't think, for us this season, unfortunately. A lot of these huge CLV situations haven't quite panned out in our favor, but hey, that should start flipping soon. So hopefully it does flip today if Kyrie is out. I actually like the under less if he's out, as weird as that sounds. I think the market will adjust to it pretty quickly. I don't think the value will be there anymore. Just because I think that the difference in style of play when he's off the floor might lend itself to the Nets being more aggressive in attacking the rim. And obviously that's the best way to attack the San Antonio Spurs, is to get to the bucket wherever possible. Kyrie, obviously someone who can score at all three levels, but I still question his decision-making at times. And I think he will probably try and carry too much of a burden that doesn't need to be carried in a matchup like this. So I kind of like if he's in the starting lineup more, and I like the under more as well if he's starting. So we'll have to definitely keep an eye on that. Once he's officially ruled in or out, I'll run my numbers on that one a little bit more specifically, and we can come to a conclusion, I think, on what we do there. But I'm happy with my position on the Spurs. I sort of touched on it on the Bet US show for guys that tuned in there, and just obviously doubling back on what I said earlier in my little review on where the Brooklyn Nets stand at the moment. I just can't trust their offense. I think they need to figure things out. They're going to be in situations as well with Ben Simmons on the floor where essentially you're playing 4-on-5 basketball, because he's such a non-factor scoring the basketball. The guy had 0 points and 3 field goal attempts against the Celtics. And I know it's obviously a much better defense than someone like San Antonio, but you can't rely on him to score at all. And that just puts a lot more pressure on those other guys and those role players who aren't going to have that same space to operate around the perimeter as what they have when this team's been at full strength. So even prior to Kevin Durant going down with injury, I think this is a team who offensively was sort of playing above their means, and we were already expecting some level of regression there, where offensively, they were sort of bottom 10 in the league in terms of location effective field goal percentage, which means that if they shot at league average, or at the player-specific average from the spots where they were generating their shots, they would perform far worse than what their output actually was at the time. So there was already regression expected for them. That's probably just going to hit harder now more than ever with obviously their main shot maker, shot creator, and leader on the floor being out of action. So very happy with the Spurs +6 position. Naturally, still think that it's going to be a case of potentially too much CLV if Kyrie Irving's out. Maybe we buy back if the number drops too far and try for a middle there. But we'll see how that one plays out. I don't have anything else on today's slate that really jumps out to me. The only other bit of market value I had, like I said, was on the Clippers Philadelphia full game overs, but I'm not going to be getting involved in that one just yet. I still think that the Clippers are going to be a buy team, but we'll have plenty of opportunity to buy on them in the coming weeks as well, especially heading back out on the road where I think that they have performed really well at full strength so far this season. They were the best road team for quite a while, the best Western Conference road team for quite a while. Before Paul George went out injured. So we should see them back to their best there as well in those spots and situations. But nothing else for me today. So let's jump into our squad ride. Let's have a look at what the Discord had to offer today and what it is we see as being free money per se, as they like to say. Denver Nuggets first quarter -2. Look, I think it's really hard to talk you off of that. The Nuggets have just been a first quarter wagon at home. They've been a wagon at home, period. But that first quarter, I think, is definitely probably the best look for them. That starting lineup for them is just playing at a ridiculous level on the offensive end. I don't know how sustainable these numbers are, but at the same time, I sort of mentioned this in the preseason NBA guide where this starting lineup, it didn't get a ton of possessions together last season, but when they were on the floor together, they were already at an elite level on the offensive end of the floor. And after a somewhat slow start, they figured things out pretty quickly and have gone back to being able to execute at that level. Their starting lineup, just having a look at it now, 122 points per 100 possessions, a 61% EFG percentage, and a plus 14.4 point differential per 100 possessions. That's just ridiculous numbers. My only concern, I think, for Denver in this one is that they do have trouble guarding high-scoring guards. So Anthony Simons, Damian Lillard, I think, do have their way a little bit offensively. Can they keep up, though? I mean, it's a tough ask. Maybe they can keep up for that first quarter, but over the full 48 in Denver is really, really difficult. But again, that squad ride first quarter, Denver -2, I don't think I could talk you off it. The only other one that popped up was the LA Clippers money line, and that's going to just be extremely dependent on whether Paul George is available. So I wouldn't put that as the best one forward. Obviously, I would throw this to our guests and I will let them choose what the best squad ride is for the day. But I'll go ahead and pick one here. I'm going to say Nuggets first quarter -2 is the best squad ride. I think Matt put that one forward. He's the first quarter specialist, so I'm more than happy to go ahead and roll with that one as well as the squad ride official bet for today. Denver Nuggets -2 in the first quarter. Not that I'm necessarily on the other side in the LA Clippers money line situation. I just think that there's obviously too many question marks there, and it's going to extremely be around the availability of Paul George. So that will be that best bet. And then my best bet, of course, being the San Antonio Spurs today at the +6. The fade Portland, I think, will continue for probably the next week, maybe. But then once that schedule eases up for them, they're going to be a buy-on team for me for certain. I think that, they've had the toughest strength of schedule so far this season. They have been brutalized by the NBA schedule makers. The travel that they've had to endure has been pretty ridiculous. They're a little bit thin at the moment. I think someone as well like Justice Winslow being out is one of those guys who is going to have zero effect on the market whatsoever, but has a huge impact on what Portland can do and the minutes that he's able to provide when they go small ball, when he plays at the 5, really opens things up for them offensively. And he does a terrific job defensively as well, being able to then allow that team to just switch everything. They can switch 1 through 5 when he's on the floor. And, especially with some of those longer guys like Shaedon Sharpe out on the perimeter that can match up inside as well if need be. So I think Portland's a buy team at some point very, very, very soon. But I don't think that is today. So Squad ride, first quarter Nuggets -2. I'm cheering for you guys. I'm not betting it, but I'm cheering for you guys nonetheless. Let's keep track of these squad ride bets, though. Let's see how you guys perform over the full season. Hopefully, I can turn it around full season as well. Like I said, the only bet for me today is going to be on the San Antonio Spurs, the +6. I wouldn't bet it now if you haven't bet it, by the way. Not a +4, not even with Kyrie questionable. I think if you haven't already got involved, avoid that one. But we'll look at some full game under, maybe team total unders as well, depending on the final lineups there once they do become available in due time. But that'll do us for episode 1 of the Board Better Show. Like I said, we will have guests basically every single episode from here on out, a couple of times a week, so that we can discuss a lot of these topics in depth a little bit more, bounce off of each other's ideas, have some nice debates as well, which is always fun to get people who might see things a little bit differently, so that we aren't having to just listen to me ramble about my opinions on things all the time. But I do appreciate all of you guys joining in. I hope the format of the show makes some sense. I hope it is interesting and appeasing going forward. And like I said, I'll have a lot of really high profile names on here as well that'll certainly make for entertaining viewing and some really good analytical breakdowns as well that come with it. But that's all for us. Like I've said before, please do drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll be doing this at least 2 times, hopefully 3 times a week going forward for the rest of the season and through the playoffs. So I will leave it at that, everyone. I will chat to you guys all in the Discord. Shout out to my producer as well. These transitions are not me. I could not do this shit at all. So appreciate all the hard work that Chris does in producing this show, getting the graphics up and making everything look as good as possible for you guys. Let's have ourselves a nice, easy day at the office. We'll get back to work again tomorrow, and hopefully we will run another episode later in the week with our first guest as well. But look forward to doing a full season of this with you guys, breaking down, like I said, some individual players and teams, and really deep diving into where we can get ahead of the markets going forward. I will chat to you guys all in due time, no doubt, though. Enjoy the rest of the day and enjoy the NBA action.